Hey guys, this is Tamara Calder Richardson, and welcome to the Seeking Heaven channel. And we are live tonight with Seekers Live. So we have a very special guest for you. I'm going to introduce in just a second. A couple announcements. First of all, subscribe if you haven't. Tell your friends about the Seeking Heaven channel. We're going to have amazing speakers coming up, and I can tell you more about that later. But we're having just a nice variety of a spiritual community is what we're building. A soulful spiritual community. So make sure you like and subscribe, make any comments. If you have any suggestions, I'm totally open to that. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to open it up for our guest. Let me get my... Okay. There we are. Hi, guys. Tamara's here. Now you can see my face. I had some technical difficulties. The button wouldn't click. All right, good. So look, I wanted to introduce you to, this show. If you don't know about it, the Seeking Heaven channel, where we have near-death experiencers, spiritually transformative experiencers, people that have had Kundalini awakenings, people that, have talk about the after effects of these things that still affect their life today. And we have a very special guest that is the expert in this area that's had 40 years of research. And this would be someone that, my gosh, coined the term. She is the mother of STEs, Spiritually Transformative Experiences, who coined that term, has had 40 years of research of near-death experiencers that she's interviewed, including, people that have had spiritual experiences as well that changed their lives. And she knows the definition of all the different types of spiritual experiences that you've had. And I know some of our experiencers are watching right now that are still trying to formulate what they went through, or what do you call this? So I want to welcome, let me bring to the stream, Dr. Yvonne Kason. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And before we start, I wanted to first of all say I'm super excited. I told Dr. Kason that I am just such a big fan of hers and her work. And after reading her book, I'm like, wow, it has given me so much clarity into the different spiritual experiences that you can have and that are available to you, and just to allow that to happen. But I wanted to talk about the great news that I am now, the Seeking Heaven channel is an affiliate member of the, Yvonne is the president of the Spiritual Awakenings International, and now we're an affiliate member. So we will be also having some of her guests, yay, on the show and promoting her events. And when she has, they're going to have a conference online in June. It's going to be a big to-do, a summit. And we will be letting you know all about that, all the cool stuff that's going on, all the events. And she just knows so many neat, interesting people. I've had a ball just meeting some of the people. And then next Thursday, we're going to have her. Yvonne is co-founder and the president, but her partner, Robert Bear, will be on next Thursday, and also the live chat, who is a delight. So first of all, I wanted to welcome you. And
thank you.
And I know we had talked about there's so much that we could cover, but I thought, Dr. Kason, if we could just go through and talk about clarifying some of these terms, and then we can dive into it a little bit more, and I'm just going to let you do your thing.
All right. So I just want to mention to people who are listening that the book you're referring to is called Touched by the Light. So if you Google my name, you'll see that book, Touched by the Light, which just came out last year. And in that book, I do summarize and define for people using like close to 100 case examples of people who've spoken to me about various types of spiritually transformative experiences. So to help people figure out a name for the experience that happened to them. I found in my work as a doctor, because I was the first Canadian medical doctor to specialize in counseling patients who'd had diverse types of spiritual experiences, that the most common thing was that people didn't even have a name to call what had happened to them. They'll say, "Doctor, I hope you don't think I'm crazy, but this is what happened to me." So a big part of what helped people was after I listened to their story, if I was able to give them a name that was not calling it crazy or a hallucination, because before they found out about spiritually transformative experiences, maybe that's what other people had been telling them. Maybe that's what their family was telling them. Maybe that's what they thought themselves, like, oh my gosh, I must be going crazy. I've never heard an experience like this. So anyway, so that's why I thought it really important that I pull together all these case stories and then give names to the experiences so people can go, oh, that's called a clairvoyant experience, or oh, that's called an out-of-body experience, or wow, that's called a near-death experience. Now I know what to call what happened to me. So,
and I've got your book right here too, so people can see and that they can know where to purchase this, which you can do that on Kindle, or if you want the hard copy on Amazon, Touched by the Light. And so this really goes into detail. And I like your chapters, how you sorted out the different chapters, what they are. I mean, this is phenomenal. We have I'm just going to shout out a couple of people watching that are really excited. One is my cousin that I met on Ancestry 3 years ago, which she's so cool. And she's also studied with yoga masters like you. So I thought you could mention a couple of things. And then we also have, and I'll mention his book here, Mark Ferrantino, who was a client, who's now a friend, and he finished the book on the Einstein Book of Relativity and about time travel. So it'd be nice if we could just, he's very interesting. So there are a couple special people here today. So maybe you could talk about your background a little bit, because it's so interesting, and also about studying. You went from, I guess, traditional with the Christianity, and then you evolved and then you studied with the yoga masters. Can you tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey?
About my personal spiritual journey? Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, I was raised a Christian, Protestant Christian in Toronto, Canada. And I was not aware, because as a child, I'd never heard of paranormal or spiritual experiences, but I now realize, looking back, that I had 2 near-death experiences when I was a child. I had one when I was 5 years old, when I was almost hit by a train, and I went out of body, and time stood still, and I felt the peace and the calm. And then somebody pulled me out of the path of the train, and then life went on. But I didn't know that was a near-death experience. As a kid, as a 5-year-old, I thought I could fly, and that's how I understood it. And I remember trying to fly afterwards, and I would climb up on the fence and jump off, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't fly down the street, because I had such a clear memory. That's how I understood that experience as a kid. Now I can say, yes, it was an out-of-body type of near-death experience, but back then I didn't know. So I'm sharing this because my life, I now realize, was beginning to get touched with STEs at a very early age. So that happened when I was 5 years old. Then when I was 11 years old, my family was involved in a very major car accident. And I was seriously injured with a head injury. I was unconscious for 3 days afterwards, but I had a near-death experience in this car accident. When I was unconscious, I remember floating above my body and watching the accident scene. And then in the emergency room, I was up above. It was like the ceiling was invisible, and I was looking down, watching the doctors trying to resuscitate me. But as a kid, I had just turned 11. I didn't know. I thought that happened to everybody when they were in a coma. I didn't know any better. I didn't talk about it or think it was like paranormal or anything like that. It was
you're normal.
That's what that for me, that was normal. But I now realize that like spirit was already introducing me to crossing over to the other side when I was 5 years old and 11 years old. Then, but after that experience, for almost a year afterwards, which I now understand is an after effect of near-death experiences, I could see ghosts. I could see spirits. So, and I remember I tried to talk to my parents. I thought our house was haunted, and I refused to sleep in my bedroom. I insisted that my bed be moved in with my brother and sister into their bedroom, because I was afraid of what I was seeing at night. But
that is totally me too. I get that. And real quick, because people want to know the difference between, I mean, I know I'm going to get the questions, ghost and spirit people, and I was seeing different dimensions and different things too. So just, I'm trying to, because there's so much here, but your eyes were opened up. What was it, the first experience, or was it the second one that did that?
It was my second one. It was when I was the one I had when I had just turned 11. That after that, for almost a year, I could see ghosts, spirits. As a child, I called it ghosts. I didn't know what any other word to call it.
Yeah.
And although they were not frightening or doing anything that should make me frightened, I was just frightened that I was seeing them. I didn't understand it, you know, and that when I was trying to explain it to my parents, they were saying it was all my imagination. But, you know, as I'm pulling the sheet over my face, so trying not to see them, this isn't my imagination. Anyway, so that you're asking about my own personal spiritual journey. So I now realize it started when I was a child. And then I was always sort of into outside the box, you know, thinking outside the box as I was growing up. And I mean, I was in that generation where we were influenced by things like Timothy Leary, who said you could have mystical experiences through use of LSD. And then the Beatles, you know, they got into yoga and meditation. They introduced these concepts. So I was a teenager and growing up with all of this stuff. And so it sort of introduced me to that there's more out there. But I was a very good student and I wanted to be a doctor. So this was sort of something I put on the periphery, and I was really focusing on my medical studies and I wanted to be a doctor. And so the next step that really propelled my spiritual journey forward was when I was in my last year of medical school. There was a meditation course that was being taught at the university, and it was supposed to help you study better and get better marks in your exams. So I took this course, not because I was trying to like have a mystical experience or anything, but because I was trying to do well on my exams. So I just started meditating regularly, and lo and behold, after about 3 months of meditation, I had a really powerful experience, which I now know was a Kundalini awakening. So this happened in my last year of medical school with rushes of energy up my spine, and I went out of body and I went into a profound mystical experience, expansive mystical experience. And then after that, I've been having Kundalini symptoms ever since. And that happened in 1976, because once the Kundalini awakens, it doesn't stop. It remains active to some degree for the rest of your life. So that has been happening to me since 1976.
Okay, so can we stop right there? There's so much, but you've got so many like good little wisdom nuggets and things that I just want to make sure we don't pass anything by. A couple things that before we get too far along, let me go back to the other thing that asked this one, the difference between you're talking about an out of body and near death. We could hold that one because I know you're going to go through all the definitions. So just remember that one. And the other one was meditation and prayer. And then if you could, this might be a good jumping point. You could kind of integrate, you know, your life with these definitions too, because you are the definition. I mean, it's a great example. Thanks for using your life as an example. But talk about what is a Kundalini? How does it happen? And through reading your book, and I was telling my cousin, because, you know, she's actually worked when I do stage shows in different cities, and she connects like I do. She doesn't do root chakra up, she goes crown chakra down. And but she studies with the you know, with yoga masters too, like you. I mean, she's going to California, probably the same place you do. So to me, it is like I get high when I really fast when I do it like that. And that really helped me, because actually in mediumship I was taught to connect from the root chakra up. So maybe you can talk about the Kundalini, how it worked, those two differences, and difference between meditation and prayer, and then just keep on going.
All righty. Well, you've asked me a whole load of questions all in one.
I did. I'm very excited.
I'll do my best to try and answer them for you. So first off, starting with the difference between meditation and prayer. So I would say prayer is like the entry point into meditation. So prayer is when we sit down, when, well, we don't have to be sitting down. We can do it in any position. When we either mentally or out loud, we're talking to the higher power, however we understand the higher power by whatever name we call it, God, Buddha, Allah, the higher power, the force. So when we're talking to that, whether it be in gratitude or with requests or asking for strength, so talking to is considered prayer. Now, meditation, and this I would say by the yogic and Buddhist traditions, is often the next step, that you might start with the prayer, and if you want to go deeper, then you enter into a period of meditation. And when we meditate, we stop talking, and it's more an experience of listening and experiencing. So we can use different techniques in our meditation to try and still our mind so that the chatter in our mind slows down. The saying in the Bible is, be still and know that I am God. And in yoga, the very first sentence of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is that yoga or God communion will happen when you manage to still your mind. So stilling the mind is very important. And so if we're able to still our mind and listen and feel, this is when we hear, feel, see the response from the higher power. And the response can be sometimes feelings of great stillness and great peace, because that too is an attribute of God. Like we experience some attributes or aspect or glimpses of the higher power, the deeper we're able to go into that stillness and meditation. But one is peace, and I want to really emphasize that, because there's always tumult happening in the world, and there's a lot of tumult happening in the world right now all around us.
Yeah.
And this is true. And but if you look through history, like, hello, it's not been any better in the last 2,000 years. There's always something going on, right? Some ups and downs.
Always some craziness. Yeah.
And so by embracing our spiritual path and our spiritual nature and learning to pray and go inward in meditation, we can access that stillness within, that peace. And that is really our true nature, is connected to that inner peace within. And so I personally recommend that anybody who's on any type of the spiritual path, no matter what path you're following, that your spirit's calling you to embrace a daily practice of meditation in addition to a prayer practice. So that was number one of your questions. Then you were asking me about Kundalini.
Yes.
Now, what specifically would you like me to talk about Kundalini?
Okay. Before we jump into that, and thanks for being flexible. So Mark Fiorentino wants to know about how to quieten your mind. And I know also Nicole has said that, that she, well, I know her background because I'm related to her, but she has a traditional ordained, I'm an ordained minister too, but she, that she was in the ministry, and then now she wanted to, continue her path, and said that, that without meditation, that so many people still have anxiety, but they don't know how to quieten their mind. Do you have some advice how you can do that? Because Mark's saying here, how do you stop the chatter?
Yeah, and that is everybody's struggle with meditation, and in yoga, it's described as taming the wild ponies, right? Your thoughts in your mind are these wild ponies going all over the place. How do we tame it? How do we still it? How do we get this still place within? Well, there are techniques that you can learn. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on the different types of meditation techniques. But let me just describe a little bit some of the techniques that can be used to still your mind. And you can learn these techniques in many different sources. If you find a spiritual path that teaches meditation, they will maybe teach you some of these techniques. But one very, very simple one that anyone can do without a lot of training, a simple meditation technique to still the mind. In yoga, it's called japa. And japa, you've seen people praying with a whole bunch of beads where they repeat a prayer over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's even done. Yeah, exactly. And it's even done in Christian tradition. It's done in Buddhism. It's done in yoga. It's done in Islam, where you repeat a prayer over and over and over again. And in the yogic tradition, it's 108 times. So your mind wants to go all over and be thinking about this, that, or the other. But if you are repeating a prayer 108 times, your brain finally says, okay, I give up. You know? Because if you keep focused,
is that what happens?
If you're going to repeat, yeah, oh yeah. When I was at a stage in my life when I was using japa as my principal technique to still the mind, so that I could then go into the stillness and meditate. When I was going through upheavals, I just said to myself, we're going to do 108. I was doing a particular Sanskrit prayer, but could be any prayer. It can be English, can be French, can be German, can be any prayer that speaks to your heart. But the thing is to repeat it 108 times, and you do it with the beads to count how many times you've done it. And the teaching is, traditional yogic teaching, if you've done 108 times and you're still restless, your mind has not stilled, then you do a second 108 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. So then you go and you start doing a second 108 times. And I have ever in my life, when I was using this technique, there was only once that I had to do a third time. And then finally my mind went, okay, that's it, we're giving up. And I entered that stage of stillness. And then so that is a technique. Another technique that many people do to still the mind is observing the breath. So just sitting erect and focusing on your third eye center, and then just focusing on the inhalation, then focusing on the exhalation, focusing on the inhalation, focusing on the exhalation. And some people combine this with a mantra or a prayer. So they could say, for example, with the inhalation, they could say, ah. With the exhalation, they could say, men. So that it's ah, men. Or if you have another prayer you like, thy will be done. Thy will be done. Or what if you have a Sanskrit mantra, you could do it. And it's by doing this repeatedly, focusing on the breath or focusing on the breath and a prayer or mantra. This is another very effective technique to still the mind. So now these techniques, somebody put a question about, so yoga is a religion.
And then also the rosary too.
Yeah, the rosary. So no, yoga is not a religion. Yoga is a techniques, that it comes from Hinduism, but you can be, I myself consider myself a Christian yogi, and you can be a Jewish yogi, you can be a shamanic yogi, you can be a Buddhist yogi. It's a yogi means that you're using these scientific techniques, specifically meditation, to try and calm the mind so that you can connect with spirit. And as you deepen in your connection with spirit, not only do you feel the peace of the divine and find yourself opening to the wisdom and higher guidance of the divine, but it also opens, according to yogic theory, it actually activates some of those unused portions of our brain and opens us to start having STEs, so that STEs start becoming a part of our life. So people who are longtime regular meditators, almost all of them are having STEs, multiple.
Okay, that's good. Boy, the questions are coming in like crazy. Okay, and thanks, Mike, for mentioning about the religion. And he also wanted the second part of that, and also Mark, about the rosary. Is that similar to the 108?
Exactly, yeah. And that's probably where it came from. Many people believe, and Edgar Cayce talked about, that Jesus traveled to India in those years between when he was a teenager and when he started his ministry at the age of 30. And he studied with the yogic adepts in the Himalayas, and actually the Buddhist adepts in the Himalayas. So, some of these traditions from the East made their way into Christianity, some of these practices.
Yes. Absolutely. It's funny because your partner with SAI, Robert. We were talking about Jesus in India. And, I mean, I guess I would consider myself a Christian mystic because I keep seeing Jesus and talking to him. Go figure. But he told me that. And it's funny because people, they shouldn't label themselves. I mean, you want to put a label there because we stop our growth. We stop our spiritual growth when we do that.
Yeah.
And we're not allowing ourselves to experience this life or the magical part of the we might want to call it miracles. Talk about the STE, spiritually transformative experiences, and what are the just use your life as an example. As an example, because you have examples of everything.
Yeah, I look at it sometimes that the good Lord was giving me my spiritual training while the outer world was giving me my medical training, that I had a Kundalini awakening when I was in my last year in medical school. And then on my main interview in my book, I talk about how at the end of my residency, I had a white light type of near-death experience when I was doing a medevac in a plane. The plane crashed, and that happened at the end of my residency. So
Wow,
so I'm just very briefly just going to describe that what happened when I was near death in the plane crash is I went out of body, I raised above my body, and then I raised higher, and I went into the realm of light and love, where I felt totally embraced by, I just knew, although nobody spoke it, that this love that I was feeling was the love of the higher power. And I just knew all sorts of things without anybody telling me. Like I knew that the higher power was like this loving force that underlies the universe, and it's infinitely intelligent and interpenetrates everyone and everything. And this was completely different from what I had been taught in churches when I was growing up that God was supposed to be like, right? That somehow I knew that what I was experiencing was what I had been taught to call God, but it was not an old man with a long beard sitting on a throne judging us. It was more like the Force depicted in Star Wars, So then this was my direct that was my direct experience, and it made me so much more tolerant of people with different religious views and spiritual views and cultural backgrounds, because I came to understand after that experience that there is this one reality, and we're all trying to understand it. And it's like climbing a mountain from different angles. So we have different perspectives. We're coming from different backgrounds. But once you get the top, it's the same light that's up there. It's that same loving light intelligence, no matter what name we call it or what route we got to the top. And it also made me very aware as a young doctor that I was convinced that the spirit lives on after the body dies. I knew it to be true because I had experienced it. And I lost my fear of death completely. And also when I came back, I was like so filled with love, that I was able to reconcile with my father. We'd been fighting. We had been speaking to each other. But, there were other after effects that a few weeks after I had that near-death experience, I now know was a near-death experience. Back then, I didn't even have a word to call it. The best word I found was a mystical experience, because somebody told me.
Well, it was, but.
They said, did you see a tunnel? And I said, no. Were you clinically dead? And I said, no, it's close to death. So that person told me it's not a near-death experience. So I thought, okay.
I've been told that too.
Then what was it? So I used to call it a mystical experience that happened in the plane crash. But now I know it was a mystical or white light type of near-death experience. But afterwards, I started, this is as a young doctor again, having what we now know are some of the psychic after effects. I started having clairvoyant experiences. I started having clairsentient experiences. I started having clairaudient experiences. So all sorts, transdimensional experiences, past life recall, mediumship. So all of these things started happening to me. And at the same time, I was having ongoing Kundalini symptoms, the rushes of energy up my spine. I was having chakra sensations. I was having unusual sensations in my consciousness and in my head. And so there was all sorts of stuff happening to me. So what all of this propelled me to go on this quest outside of my medical practice. So in my private life, so I was doing traditional medicine, and then in my private life, I was secretly a mystic, meditating regularly, having all these experiences, and researching. And I was reading from a lot of different spiritual traditions. And you're right, I did draw very deeply from the yogic tradition. I traveled to India, and I met Gopi Krishna, and he taught me all about Kundalini, and I learned a tremendous amount about Kundalini from him. And then later on in my life, I learned a lot from Paramahansa Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship and his very extensive teachings. But I also studied with other teachers along the route, with a Buddhist teacher for a while, with Native Indian teachers, because I was really interested, even from Kabbalah and Christian mysticism, because I was really interested in seeing the unity in all of this, and that's the conclusion that I came to, and why I coined this term spiritually transformative experiences, because it's a universal human phenomenon. I mean, whether you're growing up in a Christian household or a Jewish household or a Native Indian household or in a Buddhist household or a Hindu household, or what have I left off, Islamic or Zoroastrian or whatever, once we start having these experiences, they're all the same. Like the experiences transcend whatever particular cultural upbringing you're in. Like, so let's use the example of the near-death experience, because that's been researched a lot. That if you look at near-death experiences that happen to people, including children and people who've never heard about them or read about them, like me, my first three, I never heard about them. The two when I was a kid, and then the one when I was in the plane crash, I didn't know anything about them. But the characteristics are similar, no matter where people are or what their background is or what their age. But that being said, there are many types of near-death experiences. And I think that that's part of the confusion people have today, because not all near-death experiences are the same. And also, some people are using the term near-death experiences incorrectly. And that's happening a lot nowadays. And
before, real quick, because there's just so much stuff we want to cover, because I'm looking at all the chat. I'm trying to, people are real excited about this, I got to say. Okay, so one of the things before we get into the, because I do want to go into the, have you go into the different NDEs and then talk about examples of STEs. But before we go too far along, you were talking about the Kundalini and how, I wanted you to talk about how it starts from the, how it can, you were talking about the sound, it sounds like a train or it sounds like a wind, and how it can come through in ways, and what people might not realize, and how it could be related to STEs. Before going in that, there was a question here I'm trying to find for you. Oh, and Nicole loves your book on the shelf. When she did a show with me, we went to, where was it? Jacksonville, Florida. And we were there a week. I was doing a stage thing and she was helping me. And she had that book the whole time. So we were talking about that. All right. Yeah, I knew she'd be all pumped to see you today. So it's about the Kundalini and what are signs or symptoms of a Kundalini. So maybe a little bit more definition before we get into the NDEs of what's Kundalini versus a spiritual transformative experience, that you can see the comparison of the two.
Okay. All right. I will do that. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit and say, what is a spiritually transformative experience? Because a Kundalini is one type of spiritually transformative experience, and an NDE is another type of spiritually transformative experiences. And then we have more types. So spiritually transformative experiences, I coined that term. It's like an umbrella term for the wide range of types of experiences that people can have as part of their spiritual awakening process. So, and the one big category is mystical experiences. And what a mystical experience is, and there's many, many types of mystical experiences, and I describe them in my books and in some of my other talks, but just for today, a mystical experience is is the most powerful type of STE, and a mystical experience is when one has a feeling of glimpsing oneness, union, communion with the higher power in some way, shape, or form. And there are many types of mystical experiences, but they can be life-changing. One mystical experience can change the entire course of your life. The white light type of near-death experience is a mystical experience that happens when you're close to death. And that's why white light NDE experiencers are different from other NDE experiencers. White light NDE experiencers, their whole lives can be changed. They could go into it an atheist and come out of it that, you know, they're preaching the love of God and universal spirituality. So that's a mystical experience, the most powerful and most transformative type of STE. And some NDEers have a mystical experience. So another category is psychic awakenings and psychic experiences. And there's a vast spectrum of psychic experiences that people are having. And psychic experiences in yoga are called siddhis, whereas mystical experiences are called samadhis in yoga. And so siddhis, oh my goodness, there's so many things. There's clairvoyance, there's clairaudience, there's clairsentience, there's past life recall, there's mediumship, there's channeling. I mean, we can go on and on. Materializations, bilocation, transdimensional experiences, psychokinesis. I mean, there's all kinds, premonitions, precognition, time travel,
abortation, which is my favorite one.
Yeah, you know, like there's so many of them. And I mean, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a word for these things that's other than you're crazy or hallucinating, because without definitions or words, that's what sort of the mainstream, like doctors and the public, et cetera, or even churches are saying, oh, you know, you're hallucinating, or it's work of the devil, or whatever. And so I'm advocating for experiencers, saying, no, it's not crazy. It's not hallucinations. These are very real experiences that people are having that seem to be reflecting this global spiritual awakening that's happening, where the range of human consciousness is getting broader. And so those people not having these experiences, they don't think it's real, but to those having it, we know it's real. And so this is part of I think my conviction as that I'm a researcher. I'm a researcher both inside and out. I'm a researcher who's been reading the books about it and studying. All sorts of people have told me their stories, but I'm also experiencing it. So I know it's real. I'm not looking at rats under a microscope. I know I'm one of the experiencers. Yes. I know this is real, and I think I'm advocating that we have to have positive names to call these experiences. So I've mentioned two. Then we have the Kundalini awakening is another type, and I'm going to describe that for you. We have inspired creativity. So a lot of people are experiencing this as downloads, and that's what they're using the terminology today, but I call it inspired creativity. And sometimes inspired creativity can be as far as genius and sort of like combined with the mystical experience. And then there are the death-related ones. There's all kinds of death-related STEs. Like there's a near-death experience, which is what happens to somebody when they are close to death, or if they're physically dead and then resuscitated. Okay, that's the near-death experience. Then there is the deathbed experiences. So these are experiences that happen to people shortly before they die. And these are powerful STEs that can really change them, transform them. You know, they may see departed loved ones or whatever. They may see saints from their religion. It's like the veil between both sides is narrow. They start comforting their family members afterwards, saying, I'm ready to die. You know, I've had a good life. Anyway, so those are deathbed experiences. They're sometimes called end-of-life experiences, etc. Then there is another experience that happens right at the time that somebody else dies. And I call this, I've been calling this the death watch experience. So you're at your friends or loved one's bedside, and right at their moment of death, I mean, all sorts of things can happen. You can have mystical experiences. You can have visionary experiences of an angel coming to get them, or you might see their spirit leave their body, or even if you're far away from them, you might experience their spirit coming to you, even if you're on another continent, right at their moment of death. One person told me about how when his mom died, he was driving to the hospital, and right at her moment of death, he saw her face in the rearview mirror of the car. And he just knew that she had died. So anyway, these are death watch experiences. Some people actually have a shared death experience. I call that the death watch experience, where it feels like you're sharing and your loved ones crossing over. Like at their moment of death, you feel yourself pop out of body and you're going towards the light with them. And
don't you feel that's very sacred? Don't you think that's sacred?
All of them are very, very sacred. And then there's another one that I call the ushering death watch experience, where people feel they've been called out of body, just popped out of body at the time that someone else dies, and that they know intuitively what they're supposed to do is help that soul cross over into the light. And I personally had experiences of that. I had one on 9/11 when I was watching the towers fall. All of a sudden, I just found myself, I was out of body, and I was there above the crash site, and I knew what I had to do. I knew I was supposed to help people cross over to the light. And I know other souls are being called to do that too. But I mean, I wasn't like consciously trying to do that. It's like, boop, I just found myself there. So that's the difference between, say, a shamanic experience, which is when people are intentionally trying to do some of these things, versus what I'm calling a death watch experience, where it happens spontaneously. And
one other thing I wanted to mention to add on to that, as at the Monroe Institute, they do have different hemisync levels that you can go to this place, and they put you in it's called a hemisync technique, where you can go into a meditative state. And there is like soul retrieval, where you can save these people, which is kind of what you're saying. And
but that's something you're trying to do. That is a type of STE, but it's different if it's something you're doing a technique and trying to do it. I'd call that more like shamanic journeying, versus when it happens spontaneously. Like, I was watching the TV and pop, all of a sudden I found myself, out of body and above the site in New York. It was like, I wasn't trying to do that. Spirit did that to me. So then I want to mention there's the after-death communications. We left that out too. That's another death-related, really common type of STE. So I wanted to give the umbrella so people know there's such a broad range of spiritually transformative experiences. And yes, Dr. Raymond Rudy wrote a book about shared death experiences. Yes, he did. I talked about 10 years earlier at an IANDS conference. So it's been documented for a while. So let's go back to Kundalini. That was your question. You wanted to know a little more about the Kundalini awakening.
The Kundalini, and about what are the signs that that's happening? Because some people might have had it but didn't know it.
Yeah, I have found that with a lot of people, particularly people who are having multiple NDEs or multiple STEs, that they're also experiencing Kundalini awakening, but they didn't realize it. And that when you have an active Kundalini part, it remains active, and then you do start having multiple STEs as your new normal. So paranormal becomes your new normal when you're going through a very active spiritual transformation process. So let me describe Kundalini in this way. Gopi Krishna, who wrote a lot about Kundalini, he said that the principal symptoms were this, and Kundalini, for those people who are not familiar with the terms, it's a Sanskrit word, and it comes from the yogic tradition in India. And Kundalini is referred to as like a spiritual energy that all of us have in our bodies, but that normally they use the word asleep. So it's asleep, and they say it's dormant or asleep in the base of the spine is where it's allegorically or perhaps actually located, but that it can awaken. And the metaphor is it's like a sleeping serpent that awakens and rises its head up. And if it awakens, it supposedly metaphorically goes up the spine and then comes up to the crown chakra. The head's up here. And some people think that the pharaoh on the headdress of Egypt, Pharaoh's headdresses of Egypt, that serpent coming out of the third eye, was a symbol of awakened Kundalini. That they actually had rituals in ancient Egypt where they would put a prospective pharaoh in a tomb. They would try to induce, seal it, wouldn't have oxygen. He wouldn't survive unless he had something happen that would save the brain. And according to yoga, it's understood that the Kundalini can awaken to save the brain, which would also cause a near-death experience. They go into a mystical experience.
So they're hand in hand. They're hand in hand.
Yes. So there are many researchers who think that actually, particularly that with near-death experiences, people may be having a Kundalini awakening, and that part of the difference between the different types of near-death experiences is how many chakras up the spine the Kundalini went, whether it made it all the way to the crown chakra or not. And if it made it all the way to the crown chakra, that would be a white light type of near-death experience.
Okay.
I'm hoping not to confuse your listeners, but those of you who don't know about it, in yoga science, it's understood that we have, in addition to our physical body, that we have what's called an astral body or an energy body, and also something called a causal body or a consciousness body. And that the Kundalini is actually in our astral body or our energy body, which sort of interpenetrates with our physical body. And that there are these places along the spine that are called chakras, energy vortexes along the spine, that are where the astral body intercommunicates with the physical body. And so what supposedly happens when the Kundalini awakens, this mechanism activates, is that the dormant energy at the base of the spine rises up through the chakras, through the astral spine, into the brain. And when this happens, it opens some of these dormant regions in the brain and allows us to have mystical, psychic, all sorts of paranormal experiences of consciousness. It frees our consciousness from the fetters of our physical brain, that we can experience the freedom of consciousness beyond our physical brain. So now, the symptoms that one might have when the Kundalini awakens typically are energy, light, and sound. So a sensation of energy rising up the body or rising up the spine. So energy movement. And this physical energy movement, it can be felt very, very physically. Like some people actually feel like their body's shaking when the energy is moving up their spine. And so other people, it's like they experience like just a rushing of energy up their body upwards, like whoo. There's light may be associated with it. Some people experience like a flow of liquid light going up their spine. Otherwise, people may experience it feels like they're luminous, or that the world around them has suddenly become luminous. So energy, light, and sound is the third one, that there is usually a sound associated with the awakening of the Kundalini. So there can be a roaring sound or a rushing sound. It can feel like the roar of a waterfalls, or the rushing of wind, or the rushing of wings. Other people have different sounds, which I now know are more characteristics of some of the chakras. Some people have a ringing sound, or a buzzing sound, or an electrical zapping sound. And other people have described the inner sound more like Om. You know, people talk about Om, that's the inner sound that they hear with the Kundalini awakens. Anyway, the awakening is an awakening. It's the first experience. So once this starts, the big rush maybe slows down. It often will culminate in a mystical or psychic experience, either immediately or shortly after the initial awakening. But once the channel for this energy is opened, people have after effects. So they notice rushes of energy going up their body or going up their spine. And they might notice these particularly if they're having spiritual insights. And for me, when this happens, it's almost like a confirmation that the insight I got was correct, because a thought comes to me and then I get, a rush of the energy up my spine, and I go,
my gosh,
okay, that was right on, that was bang on.
Yeah.
And so afterwards, people get energy rushes. That afterwards, people may be feeling that this prana in their energy body is activated. It's like a purification process begins, and they might feel energy movements in their bodies. They may have energy movements in their chakras. They may actually be able to visually perceive their chakras. And then they find themselves not only open to more and repeated STEs after a Kundalini awakening, but an inner psycho-spiritual house cleaning starts happening. And I look at it like an inner light. The spiritual light has been shone not only on your body, but also on your psyche. You know, so if you've not done your healing and recovery work, or you have some wounds that still need to be healed, or some repressed memories from your childhood that you've never dealt with, that these will start to surface spontaneously. And it's like spirit is trying to show you, okay, we need to work on this now. We need to clear this now. And so people in an active Kundalini process, it's not just all bliss and light. It's actually a lot of spiritual and a lot of psychological work, because these issues do come up. And, you know, so those would be the principal symptoms of a Kundalini awakening. And then a long-term spiritual transformation happens in a person once this mechanism has been awakened.
I want to make a comment here, because there's so much material. Totally going to have you back. I mean, everybody's going nuts. This is blowing up. There's so much that is just, because the more that you mention, everybody gets excited and they want to know more and then want to know more. It's funny because, you know, I'm hearing from Mike, you know, how do I open this channel? And then I'm thinking, when you have a near-death experience, it opens up. I've always remembered all those. That's why I literally touched my soul reading your book. You guys have got to get Dr. Kason's book, Touched by the Light, because it explains things in detail. She gives examples. I mean, there's only so much, you know, time and things that we can do here. We can totally have her back if she's willing, but she does go into the detail. But one of the things I remember one time, and I didn't really understand it, is that someone came up to me and they said, I've been working my whole life and you just have to die to get it. And I was like, wow, that's kind of mean. But because mom was as a kid, but I've always had the rushes, the lights, the buzz in my right ear. It's usually my right ear. I'll vibrate finally. Sometimes I've had the full trembling, and then other people, like you said, have tried so very hard. And I guess it's sort of like, I don't know, maybe I cheated. You know, I couldn't help it. But I think that when you do have an NDE, it does open that up. And even if I really tried to close it, you can't. So what about the people that haven't really opened that up yet? How can they do that?
Well, I would say the key is sort of like a 3-point key, if I may say that. And I do talk about it in my book, is that basically you're trying to awaken a spiritual energy, a spiritual potential in you. So number one, you have to embrace this as a spiritual path, you know, and, you know, you need to find your way of relating to the higher power that resonates with your soul. So, you know, whether that be Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, shamanic, you know, follow the spiritual path that resonates with your soul, or explore a few different spiritual paths. You know, if you're not sure, explore a few different ones until you find one that resonates with your soul, because this is a spirit you're trying to spiritually awaken if you're trying to open the Kundalini channel. Number two is once you found a spiritual practice that resonates with your soul, to begin a daily practice of prayer and meditation. And this involves humility. This involves gratitude, in addition to doing the practices to still your mind. the meditation practices, with your attention always focused at the third eye center, that will draw the energy up to the brain chakras. Then the next thing I want to mention is your lifestyle, is to try to consciously and intentionally live according to the universal spiritual laws. So that would mean, do not lie, do not steal, be humble, honor thy father and thy mother, whatever spiritual path. I mean, the rules, there's a reason there are these rules in all the world's great religions, that they are the rules that will make your consciousness be more aligned with spirit. So consciously try to make yourself a saint. Okay, like let's imagine that you love St. Francis and the prayer of St. Francis, which is one of the prayers that I really love. And try to live your life that way, because if you're trying to live by these moral and spiritual precepts, you are helping remove the blockages that are blocking your subtle body from spiritual awakening. So, and then the last piece is do your psychological work, because unresolved psychological issues, if you're carrying around a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of anger, a lot of wounding, whatever it is you're carrying around with you, these psychological issues are also blocks to the spiritual energy awakening. So when somebody said, how do you awaken this energy, that this is a life's work, right? To awaken it in a healthy manner. And I think if you sincerely strive to deepen spiritually, to grow spiritually, to live a life according to these universal spiritual principles, and practice prayer and meditation with an attitude of love, surrender, and gratitude, that with time, when spirit knows the time is right, that channel will awaken.
Wow. Well, I think you're right. It has to be, it's an alignment, and I think also that it's funny, I'm getting lessons these days and certain words, and, Jesus has been my teacher, not that other, that I know there's other, masters and so forth out there. And, but the word purity, what is pure? I think it has to do with this. It's a beingness. It's not really a doingness, but it's a beingness. And, to me, it's the intention. It's the intention to want to be on purpose and know the divine. That doesn't mean that we're perfect. We're not. We're kind of broken. A lot of us. We're human. It's that human experience. So I think that what makes me sad is when I hear people go, "Oh, I'm not good enough," kind of thing. Well, honestly, none of us are. But I think it's the simpleness of surrender, like a child, and go, okay, and that's how I do it. I surrender, and I start with gratitude by saying, thank you for my breath. Thank you for this body. Thank you for this vessel. Thank you for this day. And I start with anything, just little things. And as I start doing that, then I feel my heart getting bigger, and I visualize the bright light with little golden specks coming to my, I like the little golden specks. It's just magical, like a unicorn, and coming down through my head and then permeating through every part of my body. And then I expand with the divine, and I sit and bask in love and appreciation. And then I just out of there. That's how I do it. Because the gratitude and love go hand to hand, because we are given this breath every day. We don't have to be here. And that's a gift. And you're a gift. My God, here we are at 7:00, and we did not even go through everything, but people are really excited. Guys, let me ask you this: is there one, just before we wrap up, people that are watching right now, and people are really excited, is there any final questions that you've got that we can just handle, and then if not, we'll move on, and then if we can't get these questions, and then we'll just set up another time where you can answer it, because there's so much for people to look at. Is there any books that you recommend while people are writing in the chat? Is there anything else they learn about?
Well, of course, I recommend my book, Touched by the Light.
Absolutely.
And that would be the #1 book that I recommend. People that are interested in learning more about yoga, I recommend Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda as an excellent book to learn about yoga. And his organization, SRF, also sends out lessons that teaches you meditation techniques if you want to learn that particular type of meditation technique. Okay. And then the other thing is to actually read the scriptures of the particular spiritual path that you're drawn to. You know, and if you're on a true spiritual quest, you know, you might find a lot of pearls in your scriptures, not necessarily the way the priests or traditional churches are interpreting it, but your own inner understanding as you're contemplating some of the words in various scriptures, whatever tradition you're drawn to. And the last thing I'd say is, rather than a book, is being in nature and being still and getting out of the kerfuffle of the city. That was really important for me in my spiritual awakening. I tried, we had a cottage and it was out in the middle of the bush, middle of nowhere, no electricity. And that was so helpful to me to reconnect me with what is real.
Wow. Yeah, nature is very important, but it's hard these days because it's cold.
Yeah.
In a lot of places. And so it's difficult to get out, but in some form or fashion that connects us because everything is breathing and living. Everything is God created.
Yeah.
And then that connects our soul to that.
And we can get outdoors in the snow too, get bundled up, go outdoors, and, you know, sunny day, the sun sparkling on the snow. It's awesome.
Well, that sounds what I'm going to tell people right now for us to wrap it up, to join us next Thursday at 4, because we're going to have the premiere of the Vice President of Spiritual Awakenings International, your partner, at 4 p.m. And then Robert Bear is going to be on the live chat. It's funny because we talked about Jesus in India. I'm like, he can talk about anything he wants to. Same as you. I mean, he's just a wealth of information too. And also wanted to mention the website. Tell us a little bit about, to wrap up, about your organization that I'm so excited to be a part of, the Spiritual Awakenings International, and how that was formed. I know it's a passion, it's your child, it's your baby, and why that was of all these years. This is kind of like your thing now. So tell us how that happened.
Right. Well, you know, a year ago, I was the president of IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And, you know, having had 5 near-death experiences and me being a doctor, et cetera, I guess it's natural that they would have asked me to be their president. But in my heart, I was actually called by Spirit, even before I was elected president of IANDS. I knew, and Robert knew, we both got a calling. We both had an STE that told us that we were being guided, that we were being called to start another organization, which would look at more than just the near-death experience, that it would look at the whole range of spiritually transformative experiences that I've always been trying to educate and inform and share with people. And that this organization, I was even given the name, we would call it Spiritual Awakenings International. And so this has been our vision. Robert Bear and I co-founded it because we both got the calling, which was...
Yeah, you know it's right when that happens. When Spirit tells you and you both get, and synchronicity, then you know you're on it.
Yeah, and that we wanted to form a worldwide organization that is raising awareness and raising consciousness. So raising awareness about the whole spectrum of STEs and different types of spiritual awakenings people are having, including sometimes some of the difficulties people are having during their spiritual awakenings, like spiritual emergencies, which we're actually having somebody this month on the 16th, Dr. Emma Bragdon is going to be talking about spiritual emergencies that people can get into.
Can you define that really quick so people aren't left with a misunderstood word real quick?
Okay. A spiritual emergency is if somebody's having difficulties or crisis related to their spiritual awakening, perhaps they're being overwhelmed by their experience, or that they're so psychically open and intuitive, they don't know how to handle it because, you know, they walk down the street and they can see what's wrong with everybody, or they can, you know, what's going on in their private lives, etc., or they're having so many mediumistic experiences, like, am I ever going to sleep, or all these, like, so they can get into crisis. So And if you were to talk to an uninformed psychologist or psychiatrist, they might think it's some sort of psychiatric illness, but it's not. It's actually a crisis that's related to the spiritual awakenings and STEs that are happening to them. So that is called a spiritual emergency. So anyway,
well, Dr. Kason, go ahead.
I was just going to wrap up.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to highlight some. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say Spiritual Awakenings International. So we're a global network, and anybody listening, you can go to our website. Tamara has it posted there, spiritualawakeningsinternational.org, and you can sign up as a subscriber, get on our mailing list. I have a lot of information about STEs on the website. It's free, and all of our speaker events, we have one once a month. They're all free. So, down the road, we'll probably have to start asking for donations, but we feel very strongly we want this information out there for free so that everybody can have access to it.
That is amazing. Now, all I was going to say is that not only for years were you a family MD, but you're also a psychotherapist and also a researcher, and the NDE, STE, Kundalini, and it keeps going more and more and more and more. Different spiritual awakenings. So, I mean, there's so much more I know that's going to be coming from you and your brainchild with Roberts with this organization. But the fact that it's free, and you should see the caliber of the type of people that are there. It's so fascinating. I mean, it's just I cannot believe that you have this for free and at the level of the quality of the people. I mean, this is unheard of. You guys need to sign up. It's totally free. It's crazy. It's wonderful. So please sign up. I've got people from New Zealand, from Canada, from the US, all in here. They're loving this. They are digging this. But you are just a wealth of information, not only with your studies and for as your background as a medical doctor, but you as an actual experiencer of many kinds, you can validate that. I mean, Spirit knew what they were doing with you. They gave you the background, the education, and then they gave you the experience with it, so that you could totally get it. Wow, you were such a delight. We're going to hear so much more from Dr. Kason, as well as Spiritual Awakenings International. And I just thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us. Now, remember, next Thursday, 4 p.m. is the VP, and we call it SAI, but Spiritual Awakenings International, Robert Bear, and he was a former CHIPS officer as well as a professor. He's done so many things, and he has 3 near-death experiences. He's going to be telling his story, as well as he's going to be in the live chat, and he's there's so much there to him as well. So thank you all for joining us, and remember to join us Thursday at 4 and Friday at 6 for the live chat. And thank you so much for interacting. This has just been fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Kason.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.